It takes a lot of genius to put a nuclear bomb together, and frankly, a baby could set one off. All you have to do is press a button, I believe, and it go. Maybe they turn a key, you got a code. It doesn't take much to launch. And the truth is, the Jewish people have always understood, spiritually, that this is also the case. This is Faith Meets Fact. That's the name of the lecture. And if you've listened to the podcast or watched any of the YouTube videos, or you're someone who's been to some of the other sessions, you've come across some of them. The idea here was to do a rapid-fire addressing of all of the major hot-button science Torah topics, how we handle them using an authentic Torah approach, and basically cram everything that takes something like, 7 or 8 or 9 hours into one 45-minute session with 5 minutes for questions. That's the plan. So when they came to me and said, can you cram 8 hours into 45 minutes? I said, yeah, that's what I do. We talk fast. So we're going to try. So we're going to talk today about science and Torah conflicts. Let me tell you something. There are not many. We're big fans. We like the astronomy. We like the medicine. We like the prayer that we can do with studying the natural world. And most of all, we like that the study of science brings Mashiach. It should happen before the end of this talk. Amen. There we go. It's not just that we love science and that science has a thing to do with Torah. We also can use science to understand concepts in Torah that were difficult for us to wrap our heads around up until now. That doesn't mean that science is teaching us new things about Torah, God forbid. Everything that was ever taught in Torah, all Torah lessons that are to be learned, they were originally given to Moses at Mount Sinai. Anybody who comes up with a new idea that Moses never heard has come up with a wrong idea. There are no new ideas that are correct. They all were given at Sinai. The Torah is complete. However, science has given us the language to understand ideas in the Torah that once were very difficult to wrap our heads around. There are many, many examples of this. I have just one on the screen that I want to introduce you to because it's my favorite, and this is atomic bombs. We talked about this last year, I believe, on Sunday, but I'd like to review. Without teaching nuclear physics right now, because I want to get on to the science-Torah conflicts, just trust me, this is more or less how it works. The way that a nuclear bomb works, the way nuclear energy works when you are harnessing it by then converting it into water or releasing hydrogen molecules. In any event, an atom, this small unit of matter, it contains an incredible amount of potential energy. You then split that atom, you break it, you split it by knocking a neutron into it, but in any event, you split an atom, split uranium, one of the 235 or something like that, you split an atom and it releases an incredible amount of energy. When this happens, it sets off a nuclear chain reaction. That is, the splitting of one atom causes all of the atoms near it to also split, and this causes a bigger and bigger explosion, and it ends up, hopefully not, right? We hope this doesn't happen ever again, but it causes an incredible explosion that can cause incredible loss of property and Rahman al-Litzlan, incredible loss of life. And the last thing I want to tell you about nuclear energy is that it doesn't take a lot of sophistication to press the big red button. You do not have to be a nuclear physicist to be the president of the United States. I think we know that. And that means that, for better or for worse, it takes a lot of genius to put a nuclear bomb together, and frankly, a baby could set one off. All you have to do is press a button, I believe, and it go. Maybe they turn a key, you got a code. It doesn't take much to launch. It doesn't take much to start a process like this. And the truth is, the Jewish people have always understood, spiritually, that this is also the case. That inside every single Jew, if God put this kind of energy inside an atom, just imagine what he put inside you. Imagine what he put inside your soul. Your soul is an incredible source of potential energy. We have always understood that if we push ourselves, if we split our personal atom, if we make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable in order to benefit our neighbor, if we give a little more charity than we're comfortable giving, if we push ourselves in the study of Torah and mitzvahs a little more than what feels okay, we split ourselves, that we can release that incredible energy for incredible spiritual effect. And we have always understood that if you do such a thing, it won't just be you. If you go back to your community and you decide that you are going to push yourself a little bit in Torah and mitzvahs and tzedakah and taking care of your fellow Jew, it will set off a nuclear chain reaction and your entire community will start doing it too. We've always known that as well. And you know what else we've always known? It doesn't take a great rabbi to start the process. Any Jew who decides they're going to split their personal atom and affect the world around them and change the world at large can do it. Whether they are very young in their Judaism, like a young child, or very old in their Judaism, like an old physicist. We've always understood this, but until we had nuclear power, until we had nuclear energy, did we really have the words to bring it home? I don't think so. One of the lovely things about science is it gives us the words, it gives us the lexicon to describe deep Torah concepts and root them in physicality. We can change the world, and we always knew it, but it's real good to have nuclear power as a proof of it in fact, in actuality, in Gashmias, in the physical world. Now let's get to the good stuff. That's how we use science. That's when science gets along. That's when science behaves. As you probably know, there are some situations where science does not behave, where the science seems to contradict the Torah. At risk of redoing many lectures we've done in the past, I'm going to jump right to the bottom line. There are approaches out there. One time I looked through just about every book I could find on reconciling science and Torah, and I got to tell you, I found only really 3-4 approaches on the books. Everybody's really saying one of the same 3 or 4 things. Number one, some approaches that exist that I'm really not comfortable with is twisting the Torah. That is, declaring that the Torah is not necessarily right, God forbid, or that the Torah should be read creatively, God forbid, in order to match the science. I don't like this, and the main reason I don't like it is because it assumes that the Torah is something that we're not so sure about, and that science is something we are certain about, and it is in fact the opposite. Science is the progressive, the constant building toward understanding more and more. Science gets better every single year. We get more and more certain about our scientific discoveries the more we study them, but science is not done and science is not certain. Torah is finished and certain and from God Almighty. So to take the certainty and sacrifice it for the possibility doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's on the books. Another approach that I'm not a huge fan of, but it's on the books, is the twist science approach, to declare that science isn't as right as people think it is. I'm not a fan. I work in science, and I need to have a job come Monday. I need to have something to go back to. We can't destroy science. Also, I just showed you earlier, the Torah values science. The Torah values the scientific establishment. The idea that we should say science is wrong whenever it contradicts Torah is alien to Torah in addition to being alien to science. So I don't love those approaches either. There are some Kabbalistic approaches that try to avoid the entire problem by introducing mysticism. And when it works, but let me tell you something. It usually doesn't work. The people who use mysticism to try to solve these problems, in my experience, do not understand mysticism. So we don't have a whole lot available to us. The last approach, which is the one we're going to use across several topics right now and apply them rapid fire to all of the major science-Torah conflicts that we've covered in previous years, is what I call the synthesis approach. And it is the approach championed by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I think you know I'm biased, but I also hope that I can show you that it really is a very good approach. The Rebbe's synthesis approach makes 2 big assumptions. Assumption number 1 is that science is right. And assumption number 2 is Torah is right. They're both right. You just got to make sure you know what science says and you know what Torah says. If you really know what everybody's talking about, the conflict tends to go away. Science is not a determination of truth. I think we mentioned this many times before, but there's a bumper sticker in my area. There's less of it now, but it was real popular a couple years ago that said that you should trust science. And no scientist would ever say such a thing. It's an anti-science statement to trust science. Ask a scientist whether you should trust them blindly. They'll go, no, let me show you my evidence. Let's talk it out. Let me know if you have an alternative theory. Let's run a couple tests. Let's look into it. Scientists are curious people. They are not definitive people. Science does not have conclusions. Science does not have proof. Science puts together a bunch of evidence, and hopefully you use the evidence to try to draw a valid conclusion. We don't disagree with any of the evidence that science puts together in principle. It's not our job to be questioning the evidence from a Torah perspective. So we take the evidence for granted. Let us assume all scientific evidence in the world is correct. That's where we start. Let us also assume that the Torah is the truth, that God wrote it, that God gave it to us, and that every single word of it is 100% valid the way it has been understood by our sages for thousands of years. When we put those 2 ideas together, we tend to turn out okay. Let me show you exactly how. There's a lot of my face. That's a lot of me right there. Anyway, we wanted to show the world how. So we wanted to show the world. You know, when I was first getting into doing video presentations, this was not at JLI. I was working for a startup, and we syndicated to the New York Daily News. So I had a video series that was syndicated to New York Daily News, and the producer on the show, I promise you, looked at me and said, "Oh, you have a face for radio." So, and I gotta tell you, I do agree. I mean, come on. They took this like one deer in the headlights picture and put it in front of a whole bunch of, like, right? I look terrified, and I am. The episodes are all on YouTube. The team there was fantastic. They, with their help, we edited my hours of rambling into something coherent, which is just a miracle in and of itself. If you want to see the miracles of Hashem, look at the editing team at JLI. And in any event, this is now available online. So we made a video series in order to go through this. And what I'm going to do with you today is make sure you never have to watch the video series. What we're going to do today is we're going to rapid fire run through each of these episodes and address the major points that came up during them. That's the plan in any case. And these are some of the screenshots of the video series. This is the big one. The age of the universe is the big one. For those of you, I see some people in the room who I visited your Chabad houses to talk about this. We've done this one before. The age of the universe is the big one. And the reason why the age of the universe is the big one is because we cannot reconcile these two easily. On one hand, the universe is supposed to be something like 13.8 billion years old. That's a really, really big number. The planet is supposed to be something like 4 or 4.5 billion years old. That's also a really, really big number. For those of you who aren't familiar with why the Earth is less old than the universe, the idea is that there was a big bang, a bunch of stuff floating around that smashed into each other, and after something like 10 billion years, 9 billion years, you end up with a planet Earth for the next 4 billion years. This is a lot of billions. But God tells us that he made the world in 6 days, and he rested on the 7th. And after that period of time, on the 7th day, we've been able to count Jewish history. We know how much time has passed. We know when Adam lived and when Adam died. We know when the biblical flood was. We know when Abraham lived and when Abraham died. We can track through Jewish history. We know that from the 6th day of creation onward, only 5,785 years have passed. And that's a big difference. You can't meet in the middle. 5,785 on the side of Torah, 14 billion on the side of science. It's a problem. So I have the conflict up on the screen. It's 13.8 billion versus 5,785 years old. How in the world do you address something like this? I mean, you could, if you wanted to, I guess, say that the Torah is non-literal, that the 6 days of creation are not meant to be understood as 24-hour days. That's an approach that a lot of people have taken throughout, not really history, throughout recent history, and that should make you suspicious. In the past couple years, when science has started saying, hey, you Torah people are definitely wrong, we're seeing that the universe is really old, a lot of Torah scholars have scrambled to apologize for the Torah and go, no. God didn't really mean day when he said day. God's silly like that. He says the wrong word all the time. God misspoke. I don't know what to tell you. God said I made the world in 6 yom, but yom, it meant a billion years. I mean, what's a billion years and 24 hours between friends? We're all analyzing text here. What's not to like? And I'm creating a straw man, to be perfectly honest with you. These arguments are a lot better thought out than that, but they have one major flaw in them. And the major flaw is not in Genesis. The major flaw is much later in Exodus, and that is the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are the real problem. In the 10 Commandments, God says, I want you to copy me exactly. I want you to be just like me. You are supposed to work for 6 days and rest on the 7th because I worked for 6 days and I rested on the 7th. If 6 days of creation are meant to be understood as billions of years, Shabbos is going to arrive once every billion years. And that's obviously wrong. So you can understand Genesis as being non-literal all you want. You can't understand the 10 Commandments as being non-literal. When God enters the scene and says, let me just clarify, that earlier thing I told you about the 6 days of creation, I want you to do it too, that kind of ends the discussion. Obviously, the 6 days of creation in the Torah are meant to be understood as 24-hour periods. 6 24-hour literal periods. And that's a lot of world to make in 6 days, and it's severely at odds with the best available evidence about space, about the planet, about everything. The geoscience doesn't match, the radiocarbon dating doesn't match, the dating of starlight doesn't match, the cosmic microwave background radiation doesn't match. Nothing matches this claim. So it's a real mess. And I don't think we can apologize for the Torah. I don't think we can say that the Torah doesn't mean it when it says 24 hours, because the Torah itself testifies that it's talking about 24-hour periods when it talks about the laws of Shabbos. I also am not comfortable twisting the science on this particular one either, because honestly, the scientific evidence is real good, and when we don't have to, we don't. I told you earlier, Torah values science. We don't step on science's toes if we don't have to, and the evidence is great. Let me level with you for a second. The evidence on the age of the universe is not great. It's really not great. There was a study that came out like 2 years ago that suggested the universe might be 26 billion years old. For those of you keeping score at home, the current evidence is 13.8 billion, so that's twice as old. We're really not sure how old the universe is at all. Any scientist who tells you they're completely sure the universe is 13.8 billion years old is lying through their teeth. However, we have a ton of evidence showing that the planet is 4.5 billion years old. The age of this particular rock converges everywhere. Everywhere you dig, everywhere you look, you keep getting that number 4.8 billion. So while I can't tell you the science is great on the age of the universe, the science is just fantastic on the age of the Earth. I'm not ready to throw the science out the window when that much work has been done and it all looks really good. The Kabbalah approach also is on the books. I'm not terribly comfortable with it, but I'll tell you it. The Kabbalah approach is that this rock that we're on has been here before. It's written in some Kabbalah books, it's actually written in some Midrashim as well, that God, when he made the world, made and destroyed multiple worlds. That God made and destroyed worlds. That this rock existed, God made an entire world. I don't know, there was probably a JLI lecture in the first version, and God didn't like it, so he started over, and now things are great. So that was sort of the rough draft. God built an entire world, built it up, put all the biodiversity on it, and then destroyed it, and then built another world on top and destroyed it, and we're several cycles in, and that's why we keep finding things that are so old, that this particular attempt by God to make a world is 5,785 years old, but the rock we're on is billions of years old. It's a great idea that would work if the people saying it understood the mysticism. That's the problem with the Kabbalah approaches. They usually misunderstand how Kabbalah works. The final authority on Kabbalah, according to everybody, the universally accepted final authority on Kabbalah is the Arizal of Yitzchak Luria. His opinion on Kabbalah is definitive. What he wrote is essentially the code of Jewish law for Kabbalah, and from this point onward, this is the truth of Kabbalah. And he says that all of the prior works describing the creation and destruction of worlds are speaking about spiritual worlds exclusively, and the Arizal is emphatic. The greatest Kabbalist is emphatic that this rock that we've been on has only existed for 5,785 years, which means we can't use Kabbalah to get out of this mess either. I'd like to introduce a synthesis approach. I'll get it right eventually. I'd like to introduce a synthesis approach. And we're going to use the tools that we talked about earlier. Let's assume the science is right. Why don't we start from the assumption that the evidence is all correct? And what is the evidence telling me? The evidence is telling me that from the Big Bang until here, if I want to get from a Big Bang into this room right now, giving this lecture, and hopefully going to a fantastic dinner in an hour or two, if I want to get to this place, I need 13.8 billion years of time to make nature do that. Nature needs 13.8 billion years to get there the long way. Let's accept that as fact. I agree. I might be wrong. I told you the number gets updated all the time, but let's go with it. Let's go with it. It takes 13.8 billion years to get here using natural processes. And it takes hundreds of millions of years to evolve animals into their present form using natural processes. However, that's where science stops. Science tells me what's in front of me. I see a lot of evidence of evolutionary processes in the ground. I see a lot of evidence of rock changing over time. I see a lot of evidence that this is how long these processes should take, and that's where science's discussion ends. What does Torah tell us? Torah tells us that God did it in 6 days. And he did. God can do, ready for it? Miracles. And by the way, this is not a novel reading of the Torah. We have always read the Torah this way. Ask a person 2,000 years ago, what is Genesis about? You know what they'll say? They'll go, this world is big and complicated. It would take any normal person or any normal being, I don't know, thousands, millions, maybe even billions of years to put this whole thing together. You know what's really cool about Genesis? God did it in 6 days. That was always supposed to be the miracle of Genesis. That was always how we read it. We always understood the miracle of Genesis, that God was able to hit fast forward on a bunch of incredibly complex processes and get them done at speed. That was always the idea. It's nothing new. The Torah and the science don't disagree. The science says if you don't hit fast forward, and if God isn't accelerating all of these natural processes to get it done in 6 days, you're going to need 13 billion years to explain this world. And the Torah says, oh yeah, you're right about that, but God did it in 6 days, 6 24-hour periods. It was a miracle. Miracles don't have to keep those rules. God can move fast. He hit fast forward. This explains, the reason why I like this approach so much is because this does not discount any of the existing scientific evidence. All the evidence is right. The evidence that it takes a long time to make a world, check. The evidence that there are natural processes at play here, also check. God was running them. He flicked them forward super fast. And it doesn't require any non-literal reading of the Torah. This is our first case of a synthesis, and this is something that we cover in the first episode at some length. This is geocentrism. This is another winner. They decided to pick all the tricky ones. Just to define the terms on the screen right here, which are not here once again. I'm going to get it eventually, I promise. Just to define the terms that are on the screen right over here. They get mad when I move away from the microphone. You probably learned in school, or you probably know even if you didn't learn from school, that we live in a solar system. Do you know why they call it the solar system? Because the system around a solar. That's right. There's a big old star in the middle, and a bunch of planets are in its gravitational field, and they move in ellipses around this sun that is in the middle. I think everybody knows that the Earth goes around the sun, except for King Solomon, the wisest man in the entire world. He didn't get the memo. King Solomon says, the Earth stands forever, the sun rises and the sun sets, it goes to the south and goes around to the north, around and around. Says King Solomon, he says this in Ecclesiastes 1:4-6, if you're taking notes. Says the wisest man ever, the earth stands still and the sun moves around it. Now, between me and you, that honestly could be poetry. But then you open the Talmud and you have Tractate Pesachim on 94b, where the Talmud specifically describes the movement of the sun around the earth as fact. And even that could be discarded, if you like, as a Talmudic idea meant to be understood at a deeper level until you get the Rambam, Maimonides, who is practically telling us how to understand the world around us and whose entire book of Mishnah Torah is Jewish law. And Maimonides declares that the earth hangs in the center and all of the other planets in the sun move around us. That's a problem. You tell a scientist that we believe that the earth's at the center of the solar system. First of all, it would not be called a solar system, an earth system. Second of all, I think everybody knows that doesn't make any sense. What in the world do we do with this? Heliocentrism versus geocentrism is the problem. The synthesis here requires an understanding of the real story of cosmology, the real story of how scientists have understood where we are relative to the universe. The truth is, I have vastly oversummarized the science on this particular front. For thousands of years, scientists believed in a geocentric model, that the earth is at the center and the sun and all of the planets go around. And you can probably guess why scientists thought that for a very long time. Because when you're standing here and looking up, you see things moving across the sky. It wasn't just that, though. There was good math behind it. The math works. The math works in a geocentric model. It does. And then around the 16th century, 17th century, Copernicus shows up, and Copernicus declares that he's pretty sure the sun's at the center. Galileo matches it with a whole bunch of math. Newton puts the final finishing touches on it, and by the 18th century, we are pretty sure that the sun is at the center. And for a couple hundred years, this is standard science. But that's not the end of the story. Because then in the early 1900s, Einstein shows up with his theories of relativity, and Einstein declares it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we're in the center or the sun's at the center. The math works both ways. Because of relativity, there's no particular need to choose any one reference frame. The reference frame of Earth at the center works. The reference frame of the sun at the center works. And the fact is, in a giant system like the universe, there's no mathematical way to demonstrate what is at the center, but there is no center. You know what a good example of this is that really kind of misses a lot of the physics, but I found captures it, at least for the short version we're doing right now? What is the center of not the center of the Earth, the center of the globe, of the map? If I were to open up a map on the screen, what is the center of the map? Depends on where you put it, right? If you want the center to be Africa, you put Africa in the center, and the countries will fan out around it, because that's how centers work in a big ball. If you want America to be at the center, you put it there. If you want the North Pole to be at the center, you bring the North Pole to the front, and then, quick quiz question for the room, you can put this on your trivia thing with the QR code. If the North Pole is at the center, then where is the compass rose? What directions are north, south, east, and west? Everything south, right? If the North Pole is at the center, everything's south. That's having fun with compass roses. Ask me about it later. Point is that we learned with relativity that it doesn't really matter mathematically what you put at the center. And honestly, a whole lot of scientists still use the geocentric model, not because they necessarily believe that's the truth of the matter, but because it's all a question of what kind of math you want to do. If you want to plot a course to Mars, the math works a million times better with the sun at the center. Therefore, adopt a heliocentric model and do the math that way. If you want to figure out how geosatellites work, the satellites that surround Earth work, GPS works, and you want to do the math for that, everybody doing math with geopositioning is using a geocentric model because the math works better. That is, science a couple years ago, almost 100 years ago now, came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter and that science has no real opinion on the matter. That is, that there is no particular preference, there's no preferred center, there's no favorite center. Putting it a little bit differently, if you were to ask Torah what's at the center of our solar system, of our universe, the Torah would say planet Earth. And if you were to ask a scientist what's at the center, the scientist would go, depends on what kind of math you want to do. I don't care, go for it. So there's no longer a science and Torah conflict because science stepped away from the discussion. Science is completely comfortable with either approach, depending on what kind of math you want to do. Science has no opinion on whether the Earth or the sun is at the center. There is no center. It's a childish way to view astrophysics. An adult astrophysicist would tell you, whatever, Earth, sun, whatever, not a big deal. In comes the Torah and tells us, God says the earth is at the center. So we have the Torah versus nothing. It's not a conflict between science and Torah. It's Torah saying something and science going, sure, if you want. That's Baby Yoda right there. This one's not really a conflict. I put this one up here just for fun. If you were here previously, at least one time in the previous years, we did the aliens talk. We're going to do it again real quick. Let's create a conflict. Let's cause trouble. We'll create a bit of a conflict. Conflict is that we have, according to science, very likely, a universe teeming with life. Now, is that true? I don't know. A whole lot of scientists would tell you that the fact that we have not been, that nobody's reached out up until now means nobody's out there who's capable of reaching out. But I think most people in the field would tell you that we're pretty sure if we keep on looking around, we'll at least find single cellular life in some body of water on some moon or on some planet. We're expecting to find life on other planets eventually. That's a fair assumption that this universe is enormous. There's stars everywhere, quite a few planets in the Goldilocks zone that are just the right distance from a star in order to get the job done for life. We assume that there is life on other planets. However, we only know of God creating life on this planet Earth. Therefore, do aliens contradict the Torah? And you might remember that last time what we did is we clarified the science. We said last time, you only think the science-Torah conflict exists when it comes to geocentrism and heliocentrism because you haven't been told the science properly. Here, we're going to do the opposite. You haven't been told the Torah properly. The Torah sure has got aliens. We've got aliens in the Torah. And one of the places, at least my favorite place, the one I'd like to introduce you to right now, is in the Song of Devorah. Devorah was a warrior prophetess and kind of a rabbi. Don't tell anybody. That'll get cut from the lecture. She was a judge. She led the entire Jewish people. She went to war. She was everything. She was a leader of the Jewish people. You guys have Chabad houses back home? She was a shlucha. Devorah that's what she was. She ran a Chabad house, except for the whole Jewish people. She goes to war, and after she goes to war, they win. Spoiler, I don't want to ruin the Tanakh for you, but they win. She wins the war, and after they win the war, she sings a song. It's called Shiras Devorah. And how can I say this? Let's just go for it. She does a diss track. That's what she does. She raps a diss track about everybody who didn't help her fight the war. Shiras Devorah is a long list of insults for people who didn't help her. That's what it is. Devorah goes, praise be God, you helped me win the war. And by the way, this one country asked them to come help and fight, and they didn't. Cursed forever, those jerks. And then she moves right along. Praise be God for helping us win the battle. And by the way, this guy, he didn't come when I called, dead to me. And that's the Shiras Devorah. And she just goes through every one of the praises she has for God and all the people who are on her list now. And that's the Song of Devorah. Read it if you don't believe me. In that list, when she's doing her list of people she's not happy with, she says, Uru Meroz, cursed is Meroz, and cursed is everyone who dwells on Meroz. Kel Yeshveh, every single person who dwells on Meroz, they're cursed forever. They did not answer when the Lord called on them to help us fight. You know, we know a lot of the ancient world. We've never heard of Meroz. Never heard of them. They're not a nation. They're not on the map. They're not a nation. They never were a nation. We have no archaeology on them. We've never heard of Meroz. So the Talmud in Tractate Moed Katan asks a simple question. Where and who is Meroz? And the Talmud has two answers. Answer number one, Meroz was a warlord. In that region, they have warlords. They people who have their own little enclaves. Wasn't really a country. Didn't really have its own system. There's this guy Meroz who was supposed to bring an army. He didn't show up. Devorah is furious. Fine. But then the Gemara says, if you want, I have another answer to this. We have a tradition that Meroz is a planet. Devorah says, cursed is Meroz, and cursed is everybody who lives on it, because when I called them to come fight a war, they didn't come. According to the Talmud, Devorah is saying, I curse the aliens of Meroz for not engaging in intergalactic warfare on behalf of God. It's in the Talmud. And the point isn't that the Talmud is saying there are definitely aliens, because remember, the Talmud has two opinions there. The point is, you know what happens in the next line of the Talmud, or what should have happened in the next line of Talmud? The Talmud should have said, wait a minute, aliens? But it doesn't. The Talmud just goes on like it's dropped nothing on us. Talmud goes, could be warlord, could be aliens, what's for lunch? The idea of there being aliens capable of intergalactic warfare who didn't show up and who are cursed by Devorah, the Talmud goes, yeah, could be a warlord, could be aliens who failed to fight a war from flying saucers, whatever, both sound valid to me. On to the next question. The fact that the Talmud uncritically entertains the possibility of life on other planets demonstrates to us that the Torah has no problem with the concept of life on other planets. There are a couple limitations on exactly what that life could look like. They never could have received the Torah because we know the Torah was only given here. They would not have any laws at all. They wouldn't have the 7 Noahide laws or Torah laws, because what defines humanity is the possession of some law, either the 7 Noahide laws for the Gentiles or the 613 laws for the Jews. We would define them as not human. Even if they're very intelligent, we would define them halachically as animals. But could there well be life on other planets? Absolutely. Could it be intelligent life? Sure. Could it be life capable of fighting a war and not showing up? Sounds like it. So this time, our conflict between science and Torah is resolved by clarifying the Torah. There's no conflict here. The Torah is fine with aliens. We find aliens. What's the Torah going to say? Told you so. That's what we're going to say. Let's do the last one that we have on the screen, I believe. Archaeology is, generally speaking, our friend. We usually get along very nicely with archaeology. I assume some of you have been to Hezekiah's tunnels. That's described in Malachim Bays in 2020. It was an old siege fortification. We dug around and we found the tunnels that are described in Malachim Bays. In 2 Kings, I believe they call it in the world at large. There's Sancheriv's prism, which is an actual archaeological find. It's an Assyrian artifact that shows the nation's siege of Yerushalayim exactly during the same period of time that we have listed in 2 Kings and chapter 18. We have the Tel Dan inscription, which is a 9th century basalt stele that has the words House of David written on it. We have the Mesha stele, which was commissioned by King Mesha of Moab to recount the specific events described in 2 Kings. So generally speaking, when we dig around in the land of Israel, it is very vindicating. Jews don't need this. We believe no matter what. We are believers, the children of believers. We don't need proof for Torah. We don't need proof for Judaism. We have a godly soul in us that declares, I believe every single word of the Torah in all times and all places. But you know what? Digging in the land of Israel sure is vindicating. It feels good. Every time we dig, we find that the Torah is true. We knew it all along, but it's cool to see it in stone. Except for when it doesn't, right? Every now and then, you have an archaeological finding that causes problems for us, and the one that I want to discuss today is Egyptology, the exodus from Egypt. The Torah tells us that the Jewish people left Egypt with a significant fanfare in the year 1313 BCE, which would be the year 2448 on the real calendar. That is 2448 years since God created the heavens and the earth. Refer back to episode number 1. We would expect to find evidence of our 210-year time in the land of Egypt. There were 600,000 of us who left, and that's only men between the ages of 18 and 60, I believe 20 and 60, 18 and 60. It's only men of a certain age. When you add in women, you've got to at least double it. Add in children and old people, you got to add a little bit more into it. It's safe to say that there was something like 2 million, 2.5 million people leaving Egypt. That's a big number. You would expect to find some evidence of us having been in Egypt, and unfortunately, we do not have any. Ask any Egyptologist, they'll tell you there's no evidence we were there. And if you dig around, you would expect to find evidence of that number of people leaving Egypt. 10 plagues, this was a big deal. The splitting of the sea, you lose the entire Egyptian army. We've got nothing. That is a real problem. So we have no compelling evidence for the Exodus, and nonetheless, we firmly believe in the Exodus. And we can't understand the Exodus non-literally. You know why we can't understand it non-literally? It's the first commandment of the 10 commandments. It's one thing if you miss like 7, 8, or 9, but it's commandment number 1. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Yeah, you can't miss command. If you miss a later commandment, we can talk. It's commandment number 1. The entire Passover Seder is a reliving of the experience of leaving Egypt. It is fundamental and central to our faith. A number of mitzvahs that we do are specifically there to remind us that we literally were in Egypt and literally left. Tefillin exists for that. We can't cancel the Exodus because we haven't found evidence for it. So what exactly do we do? Here, all we have to do is understand the science a little bit better. We can't move the Torah on this one. Let's look at the science. Is it true that we have no evidence for the Exodus from Egypt? It is. It is. We can talk about it later in the tea room, but all the things you've heard, they're not really true. I was growing up, they told me that there are chariot wheels inside the Red Sea. People have gone down and looked. There's nothing like that. There was an amateur archaeologist who was trying to prove the existence of the New Testament, so he's not our guy anyway. He also found Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant, apparently. Go Indiana Jones. I don't know. This is not evidence. You might have heard there was a video that came out relatively recently by Christian apologists that it featured some rabbis too. And the idea of the video was to demonstrate that there's a certain area relatively close to Egypt where it looks like the Jews might have lived because there's a big statue of somebody who's wearing a Technicolor dream coat, which is just awesome, and 12 perfectly marked graves showing the graves of the tribes. The truth is there are 27 graves there and the guy's not wearing a coat and he's Asian in appearance. So it's very obvious that these are forced. I'm just telling you, the evidence is not there. I'm a scientist. It's what I do. Let me tell you, there is no evidence we were in Egypt. You know what the good news is? There is no evidence at all of anything from that period of time. We don't have evidence of Egypt from that period of time. You probably know the archaeological record is not perfect. There are big holes in it. That's not true. We have one surviving papyrus from the period of time that we were supposed to have been in Egypt, that we were in Egypt, that God says we were in Egypt. One piece of paper, papyrus, that writes down something about that period of time. And you know what it is? A wine vintage docket. It's all we've got. It's all we've got. So while it's true that we have no archaeological evidence of the Jews being in Egypt during that period of time, we have no archaeological evidence of the Egyptians being in Egypt during that period of time. It is an archaeological black box. There's no conflict here between science and Torah because archaeology doesn't tell us what didn't happen. Archaeology tells us what we found so far while digging. And so far, when it comes to Egypt in that period of time, we found nothing. One of the premier Egyptologists in the entire world, a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Kitchen, wrote an entire book on this. And his conclusion was, I have no proof the Jews left Egypt, but I also have no proof they didn't. I've got nothing at all. That's what it is when you look at Egyptology from that particular period of time. So once again, we do not have a conflict between science and Torah once we truly understand the science and the Torah and assume that everybody's acting in good faith and telling the truth. These are synthesis methods where we combine the science and the Torah to come to a conclusion that requires the sacrifice of neither of them. We're out of time, so I'm going to jump us straight to the end. Thank you all very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.